My name is Christy Harting, and welcome to our podcast, Legs for Wens. Tonight we have a very interesting guest with us. Gideon Scheltema SC is a senior advocate who's had a very long and illustrious career in South Africa. For the most part, he actually needs no introduction. Tonight, in this episode, we're going to spend a bit of time talking to Gideon about his background and what shaped his career. I hope you're going to find this very, very interesting, as I did. If you like it, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button. We need your support, and that's a very good way to support the channel. Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and I'll see you on the other side of this. Good evening, Gideon, and welcome here at our podcast, Legs for Wens. It's such an honor to have you here tonight.
Good evening, Christy. I'm really privileged to be part of your show tonight.
Gideon, tell us. Let's begin at the beginning. So, after school, how did you end up studying law?
Now, perhaps I should just tell you that I grew up at a coastal resort on the southern Cape Coast, namely Mossel Bay.
Really?
And after matriculating in 1967, I did my military service in Namibia, the former Southwest Africa, and in 1969...
I wasn't even born then.
I went to Stellenbosch University, and I started to study marine engineering. And the reason for that was because of my close association with the sea and the sea life and water activities. I wanted to follow a course which would always keep me in touch with the ocean. So I decided on marine engineering. I can't tell you precisely what motivated me. Looking back today, it wasn't a wise decision. During my first year doing marine engineering at Stellenbosch, I quickly realized that the course had nothing to do with the sea. It was very technical and a bit boring. But nevertheless, I stuck it out and I studied. And I quickly realized that my fellow students had a better student life than the one I was experiencing, especially in the afternoons when I had to go to the engineering department for practical tuition. My roommate especially and the other students, they played sport and did matters like that. But as the year progressed, I started looking at the textbooks of my roommate. He was studying BA law, and I became fascinated with the law books.
Oh, really? Oh.
And I quickly realized, but the law is about people and life, whereas the engineering part, it was very cold. There was no life or people involved.
Clinical science.
Very, very clinical. And I realized that I'm actually in the wrong course. So midway through that year, halfway through that year, I decided to change courses and I enrolled for a BCom law.
Okay. And
that was now still in 1969. I continued with my studies and eventually graduated in 1974.
Okay.
Obtaining an LLB after I had obtained the BA law degree.
BCom law, you said.
The BCom law degree. And from what I've told you, it would appear that I took longer than the normal 5 years to obtain my LLB eventually. Christy, the reason for that was...
I was going to ask you what the reason was.
Look, my father was very clear when I went to Stellenbosch University. In those days, you were not given second chances. He said, you will pass every year, and if you fail 1 year, you're out of university, you go and work, and thereafter you must fund yourself. So I actually didn't write my exams in the third year, which was 1971, and mainly because of an encounter with a great white shark at Mossel Bay, which affected me to such an extent that I had to suspend my studies for that entire year.
Good grief, that's fascinating. It's not every day that we get a senior advocate that survived a shark attack. I read something about that in your book that we'll get to later, but please tell us about that.
Yes, it was the attack happened on the 30th of June 1971. It was during the winter vacation, the university vacation. I'd come home to Mossel Bay for the vacation, and I was looking forward to the mid-year break. Although I was involved in a slight accident at Stellenbosch the week before, during which I actually injured my left foot, and at first I decided I will not be able to surf.
Can I just pause there? Was there alcohol involved at all?
Can I elect to remain silent on that one? Christy, yes. I can blame the alcohol for that. Anyhow, I was at home for the holiday, and on the afternoon of the 30th of June 1971, a friend of mine, Peter Shirley, arrived at my home, and he was very excited. He had just returned from the surfing spot, which was at the point at Mossel Bay. Mossel Bay is a peninsula, and right at the end of the peninsula there's a very good surfing spot. And he was very excited, but he wanted to go and surf, and I was reluctant to actually accompany him because I was not fully recovered. I was concerned about my left foot. And under pressure, I agreed.
Rubber arm.
But I suppose in those years, you're 20 years old, there are two girls in the picture,
Yeah.
you're not scared. Injuries didn't bother us that much in those days. And I then agreed, I will actually go with him. And we then were both in a rush to actually leave to get to the surf. And in this hurry to get to the surfing spot, I couldn't find my leash, which I normally use to tie my foot to the surfboard, because the surfing spot is quite a dangerous surfing spot. The waves break on the rocks, it's a point break, and often we got separated from our boards.
Okay.
And at least the leash enabled us to keep contact with the board,
Yes,
so
of
that,
course, yeah.
especially in rough waters,
Yes.
so that it was a measure of safety.
Yes, yes.
To be close to your board.
Yes.
But on that day, I couldn't find the leash, and I couldn't care after that. I just decided I'm going to go and surf. So we got to the surfing spot. That's now the two girls in the car, Peter Shirley, my friend, and I. And it was really a beautiful day. One thing I remember about that day, it was a beautiful winter's day. And Mossel Bay is a very beautiful place on a winter's day, because the mountains, the Outeniqua Mountains, which one can see across the sea towards George, was always very clear on winter's days, and I remember that very well. It was one of those special winter days at Mossel Bay. We paddled out, and we were not in the surf for too long. We surfed a few waves, but the sea was very big, the waves were very big, and half unexpectedly, after about 20 minutes, Peter turned towards me and he said, no, he's feeling unsafe. He's going to leave the water. I was annoyed with him because I did not want to surf in the first instance.
That's very interesting. Do you think he had some premonition? Or
He definitely had, because he repeated himself by saying, there's something wrong. He feels unsafe.
Okay.
He's leaving the water. And we argued for a short while about this, because I didn't want to stay on my own. It's quite a dangerous surfing spot, and it's not wise to surf there on your own.
Yes.
But nevertheless, he started to paddle away to get back on land, and I stayed in the water. I sat on my board and I watched Peter reaching the closest rocks where the car was parked. And I actually saw him getting onto the rocks and walking towards my vehicle, which was a Beetle Volkswagen in those days, a typical surface vehicle. And at that point in time, the one girl was still seated in the car, but the other girl had moved onto the rocks when Peter and I started to surf a short while earlier, because she wanted to take some photographs with a small little Instamatic camera, one of those cameras which is not equipped with any zoom lens or any special features. It's basically just a magnesium flash, and later on you get the photograph back and you see the white of the surf and a dot. The dot is me. That's now the surf, and that's all that you can see in the wave. But it was special for us, and I've still got some photographs of those days taken with an Instamatic camera, and we treasure that. It was special for those days. And watching Peter basically reach the car, I actually turned around to look at the open sea, because at Mossel Bay one can actually see the waves approach from quite a distance. The swell appears from the southern side, and then the swell becomes bigger, and eventually the swell develops into a wave that actually breaks.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we used to do. We used to look back, look at the open sea, we could see a wave coming, and we could prepare for takeoff. And on this occasion, as I looked over my left shoulder towards the back, diagonally to the back, I just saw this huge fin appear behind me. Something I will never forget, because growing up at Mossel Bay, we were quite acquainted with great white sharks. I knew exactly what they looked like from fishing, accompanying fishermen on boats, etc., because there are a lot of great white sharks around the Seal Island in the bay. That's where they normally are. But I didn't expect a great white in this little bay where Peter and I surfed that afternoon. Christy, this was a big thing. The fin was approximately a meter and a half above the surface. Oh. So I'm just guessing now, but it was a huge fin that appeared behind me. And everything happened in a question of seconds. The swell lifted, and in the crystal clear water, turquoise color water, I could clearly see that this was a great white shark, because I knew what they looked like. And the next thing is,
I would crap myself. And then,
yeah, I'm still nervous when I think about it. This thing picked up speed. I saw the fin swiftly moving in my direction, and I knew I was in trouble. But at least it gave me time to get my legs onto the board, because up to that point I was sitting on the board with legs astray, my legs dangling in the water. And this shark approached me from the left hand side, and if I had not managed to get my legs onto the board, I'm quite convinced that this shark would have taken my left leg, because it was there for the taking. It was right in front of the shark. Getting my legs onto the board, I frantically started to paddle away to get to the closest rocks, screaming. I can't remember screaming, but that I was told that by other people. They could hear my screams over a long distance.
I can imagine, yeah.
And the next thing, it's actually quite a weird story, because I saw the fin on my left-hand side, quite close to me, about 5-6 meters on my left-hand side behind me. And the next second, I'm talking about the next second, I was attacked from the right-hand side. This shark actually swam underneath me. It must have gone deeper and then came up from the bottom. But I was definitely attacked from the right-hand side, whereas I'd seen the fin on the left-hand side. And by all accounts, there was only one shark there that afternoon. It wasn't two sharks, one attacking from the left and the other one from the right. It was one shark. And this shark came up. It was like a torpedo. That's the best way I can describe it. It's also as if the sea opened here next to me. And something, this object, shot up from the depths. I became aware of the fact that this thing clamped onto my body. I experienced the sensation of something clamping on my back, not my leg. I had no pain in my leg whatsoever. But I was now clamped on my back. That was the sensation I experienced, and I could not paddle any further, but I just got hold of the front portion of the board and holding onto the board with my hands for dear life. This shark then, after getting hold of me, actually dived. I was pulled under, the surfboard went under, I went under, and from eyewitness account, the shark also disappeared. So surfer, shark and board
All went under.
All went under at the same time after a huge splash. That splash was seen by Peter Shirley, who had reached the car. He was in such a shock when he saw what happened, because he had never seen anything like that before, and in a state of shock, he just actually ran into town, which is quite a distance from there, to get to his mother's shop. I can understand why, because he acted out of fear and shock and confusion.
And he probably wanted to go and call for help or something. Oh,
Probably, yes. Probably. I agree with you, Christy. But then I surfaced. I realized that I was actually on the surface again. At more or less the same time, I saw the water around me turning red. There was a lot of blood in the water.
I can imagine.
But still at that stage, I did not realize that my leg had been bitten. I still thought it was my back.
Oh.
The board surfaced, came up from the bottom, and instinctively, I just reached for the board, just to get hold of something.
Some floating device or something else.
Some floating device. When I say instinctively, there was no thought process, it just happened.
Yes, yes.
I just found myself holding onto the board. And don't ask me how long did it take for the shark to surface or the board to surface. I've got no idea. All that I know is that I was under the water. I could hear my heart beating. That I remember very well. And I also remember the temperature of the water.
And was it cold?
It wasn't that cold. It was instilled in my mind forever.
So you have vivid memories of
very, very clear. I can even remember the cloud formation on that day, and I can remember the color of the water. So a lot was actually captured in my mind at that time.
Like a visual photograph that was taken on your...
You're absolutely correct. And
that is horrific.
Then, as I grabbed onto the board, the following happened. The second attack actually happened. Again, the sea just opened here on my side. I was holding onto the board, and all I remember of that incident is this white belly coming straight up from the bottom, actually brushing me. It was definitely the belly part because it was white, and the board disappeared. The board was bumped. Through the corner of my eye, I saw the board flying over my left shoulder again towards the open sea. So the shark knocked this board with speed from the bottom. But the fact that the board was not tied to my leg actually saved me at that point in time.
That's interesting.
Because the board fell away from me deeper into the sea. And for a short while, the shark stayed with me. The board had landed. I saw the board landing deeper into the sea, and I could at that moment I could touch the shark. The shark was lying, touching me. The one side of the shark was right up against me. I could have touched it, but it didn't move. It was just lying dead still until there was a movement in the tail part. And the shark then prepared to take off again. And I say prepare to take off because the shark rolled before it left me and turned to the side, and I can clearly remember the eyes rolling back. This is a sight I will never forget as long as I live. It haunted me for years. This strange expression of eyes rolling back, almost a sick smile.
I can imagine.
No, I've never seen anything like that.
That is horrific.
But apparently that's exactly what great white sharks do when they attack. The eyes roll back before they attack. And as the eyes roll back, the shark then, it started off slowly, movement in the tail, and it started to move in the direction of the board.
I said it was attacking the board.
It was moving in the direction of the board.
Okay.
It actually had not attacked the board a second time. It actually moved in that direction.
Okay.
When the shark swam away towards the board, it gave me the opportunity to actually also start moving towards the closest rocks. Now, with the type of injuries I sustained, it was not possible to swim. A lot of people ask me over the years as to how fast I swam towards the rocks. There was no such thing because I was just simply too seriously injured. And because of my knowledge of the surf at the point, I realized that the white water caused by waves crashing will be strong enough to carry me. I actually made my whole body into a type of a ball so I can start rolling towards the closest rocks.
Oh, I see. So
I've lost, at that point in time, I've lost sight of the shark and the board. I was now rolling towards the closest rocks. I just knew, again instinctively, try to get to the closest rocks as quickly as I could. There was no time to swim or to contemplate anything else. I just had to go with the flow, keep on rolling. But fortunately, I was extremely fit in those days. And in this motion of being rolled along, obviously, I went under the water and the wave, and I suppose one could easily drown in that process. But when I reached the closest rocks, I heard somebody scream. This was now the girl who had wandered onto the rocks, trying to take photographs with the little Instamatic camera.
Yes, yes.
And
so she saw the attack happen. Okay.
According to her report, I didn't know why she screamed. I just know this: she yelled, she screamed. But according to what I was informed afterwards, she had not seen the actual attack, the first attack. She had not seen the board landing, being bumped out of my hands. What she saw was the following. She saw the board washing in her direction, in white water.
Okay.
And this board landed onto the rocks and got washed further onto the rocks, past her feet, where she was standing. She had my camera, or her camera, she had a towel, my car keys, and then the board washed past her. As this happened, she saw the shark for the first time. By that stage, I had already been bitten. The board had been flung further into the sea.
Yes, yes.
The fin again appeared directly behind me, swimming straight for me.
This is like a real-life Jaws story.
Yes, it is. You're quite correct. I've often thought of that.
Good. And then?
And she saw the shark swimming towards me, and that's why she screamed. It was too much for her to witness. She was actually going to witness a shark attack not far from where she was standing.
And somebody being killed in front of her.
I had not seen the shark.
Yeah.
She screamed. I'd seen the shark earlier, but
Yes,
not
yes.
at that point
Yeah.
in time. But when she screamed, I looked behind me because I knew there's a problem somewhere.
Yes, well, of course.
And then I saw the fin directly behind me. And it was moving fast. The shark was now picking up speed in my direction. But I was close to the rocks. I realized this is a real life or death situation now.
Mm.
I must get onto the rocks because this shark is going to take me before I get to the rocks. And because she had screamed, and because I had seen the fin at that point in time, I managed to get my last bit of strength together because at that stage I was very tired already, obviously because of blood loss and the pure shock. But I really got my last strength together to reach the first or the closest rocks. And being propelled by white water, I landed onto the rocks. So I did my best just to get onto the rock. The shark turned at my feet. As I landed on the rocks, I looked and I saw the shark circling at my feet because half of my body was still in the sea. My feet, from the waist down, was basically still in the water. And I was bleeding profusely. And a meter or two away from there, the shark was circling. Whether it was waiting for me to fall back to the sea, I don't know.
Yes.
But it could have taken me then.
Yeah.
But I think the shark didn't go for me at that stage because of the rock. And
Yes.
it was a little bit cautious
Yes, of course.
before going for another attack and pulling me into the water. To cut a long story short, eventually somebody came to assist me, somebody I knew, tried to lift me off the rock just to get my legs out of the water. But the sea was big and sometimes the swell would push over the rock and this guy jumped back. He let go of me because he was scared that the shark would take him.
Oh, very brave of him.
Well, I don't blame him. I probably would have done the same. And then somebody else came to assist. Incidentally, somebody who was disabled, a cripple.
Okay.
The two of them managed to lift me off the rocks and carry me to the closest road. Getting to the road, I for the first time saw the nature of my injury or injuries. And I realized this is very, very serious because I've never seen so much blood at any time in my life.
Yeah.
It was just blood everywhere. And the two people who helped me then left me. They ran back to the rocks because they noticed the girl who was with us that afternoon, she had actually fainted. She was face down in the water and she could drift out to sea. So she had to be rescued. They ran back and obviously in my state of shock, I couldn't follow everything that was happening there. But
You probably were losing consciousness at that point in time.
very close to that. Christy, you're quite correct. But at some point, they were back onto the road and they had the girl with them. She had passed out. They tried to resuscitate her and matters like that. But I noticed that I was very seriously injured and I was losing blood very rapidly. A small car stopped there. The driver, a young guy, got out, walked behind his vehicle. He gave one look and he threw his hands in the air. I looked him in his eyes, and he said, no, he can't face blood. He can't stand blood, and he's got a new car. He got back into his car and he drove off. And a little bit later, an older woman stopped there, and because this girl who had fallen on the rocks had my towel, the guys who brought her back to the road managed to get my towel and a piece of driftwood, and they made a tourniquet.
Okay.
And when this older woman stopped They placed me on in a vehicle on the back seat and just said, get to the hospital.
And so you were rushed to the hospital straight
Yes,
away.
but now, just to complete the picture here, at that stage, the hospital was already placed in a state of readiness for a shark attack.
Now, how did that happen?
I was very fortunate on that day because when Peter Shirley and I started to surf, the lighthouse keeper, Mr. Stein, he sat in his lighthouse, which is situated just above the surfing spot, about, I would guess, 700 meters on a hill. He had a bird's eye view of the surfing spot and the sea, further out to sea, and he could see the shark approaching. The shark was approximately, according to him, about 400 or 500 meters before the shark reached me. He spotted that shark swimming straight for where I was surfing.
Oh, good grief. And did he make alarm?
Well, at that stage, apparently, according to reports, Peter Shirley was still in the water, but he had just left the water. And by the time he left the water, that shark had now moved in closer. It was much closer, and Mr. Stein then ran down the lighthouse from the top where he had his observation post.
Yes.
He tried to draw my attention by hooting, blowing the hooter of his car. I couldn't hear him. It was simply too far, and it was too far for him to drive back into town and then come back via this peninsula to come and warn me.
Yes.
There was nothing he could do.
Yeah.
He was almost helpless. But at least he had the good sense to phone the hospital.
Oh, he had the presence of mind to do that.
Yes,
yeah.
because the 30th of June, 1971 was a Wednesday. And on Wednesday afternoons, all the doctors and the lawyers played golf. So he knew he better get hold of the hospital. And that was one of those factors which was very important and which contributed to me surviving this attack. He alerted the hospital of a shark attack that was about to take place. And the golf course and the hospital are actually situated adjacent to one another there. And
That's fortunate.
Somebody from the hospital ran to the golf course and got hold of the first set of doctors playing through on their first 9 holes of the afternoon. And managed to get a doctor who had just started his practice at Mossel Bay, a young guy, not with much experience, but he had experience. And by the time this lady got me to the hospital, they were actually waiting for me. At the entrance of the hospital, the doctor, the nurses, a trolley, everybody was in readiness. Despite the fact that there was no real contact from anybody in my company, the elderly lady or anybody else, alerting the hospital. It was actually the lighthouse keeper
Good.
that alerted the hospital about this attack that was about to take place. So
they got the hospital in readiness for you. And,
so Christy, I was very, very fortunate. A couple of factors worked in my favor that afternoon.
yeah.
Because,
What would you say those were?
well, first of all, if I had not seen the fin, if I had not looked over my left shoulder, and if I had not seen the fin, that shark would have taken my left leg, which was dangling in the water.
Yes.
From it was swimming straight for me, and that would have been
Catastrophic because then it would...
correct. If it managed to get hold of the leg, the jaws onto the leg, I would have been in very serious trouble, because I'll explain to you now why I say that. This shark actually, when it came up from the right-hand side, took my surfboard and leg together like a sandwich.
Okay.
The top jaw actually biting into the leg, the lower jaw into the surfboard. And the power of a great white lies in its lower jaw. There are more rows of teeth there, and they are very powerful in the lower jaw. So the top jaw was more like a knife being inserted into the tissue, whereas the lower jaw has got a different type of effect.
Oh, I see. Yes, yes.
This shark got hold of the board and the leg together, and
I saw you bringing something in this afternoon. I'm curious now. Can you? What was that? Was that part of the board you managed to?
yes,
keep?
what I did, I actually fixed the board afterwards because I didn't want the board to go to waste. Boards were always expensive, and I didn't have the type of money to go and buy a new board at that stage. I was a student.
Yeah. Well, but show us what you.
So
what you
I
brought in.
decided to actually fix the board, but keep the portion
Okay.
that shows the clear bite mark, so that at least one day I can show my children or my grandchildren what it looked like. I've actually brought this along if you want to have a look at it.
Yes, please show us.
Christy, this, if I can just explain here, it was a blue board. This is the top part of the board.
Okay.
This is the bottom. And this shark took board and leg together like this. I'm showing here,
Yeah.
like that. And this was the actual size
Yeah.
of the shark.
Yeah. Could have bitten your head off.
Luckily it didn't.
Yeah.
It could have taken any limb off. This board, even today, still fits around my midline.
Yeah.
So it could have taken me in half. It could easily have taken my leg off with the power that he's got in the jaws, and it was definitely big enough to have killed me. So I was very fortunate that this board actually saved me. And if I turn this around, you can see there's another row of teeth mark.
Oh yes, I can see it clearly. Yes. Yes.
So it had different rows of teeth, and one can see this, the skeg was here, the fin part was here, where the teeth actually connected with the fin. And that actually also saved me to a certain extent because it's very hard fiberglass.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it also
Was a
would
bit
have,
of a deterrent
it
for
would
you,
have
yeah.
lessened the impact of the actual bite.
Gideon, I see time is catching up with us. I think we must take a break and have a cup of coffee.
I think I need that.
Gideon, now tell me, now that we have had a cup of coffee, how did this whole saga with the shark attack, the whole incident, how did that affect your life? Did it change the course of your life, your psychology, or?
Christy, undoubtedly so. If I look back on this incident, I would say that it had a dramatic way on the way I was thinking. And I can honestly say, and you may frown upon it, but I can honestly say today that the shark attack was the single incident that affected my life in the most positive way.
Really?
In the beginning, I was overwhelmed by negative emotions because
Meaning just after that?
just after, in the months after that.
Yes.
Obviously, I was mentally scarred to a certain extent, and that's besides the physical injuries that I sustained, because the physical injuries also affected my life in the sense that I could not walk properly for a couple of years, and I had to work on that as well. But the mental scars were more severe than the physical scars, so I had to deal with that. And for me, the most upsetting thing was I loved surfing, and I had to stop with that for a while. Just for a while. Not so much of the physical injuries, but of the mental scarring. I was very scared to go back into the water.
Well, I can just imagine. I would too.
And I'll never forget the first day that I went back into the sea.
And how long was that after the
It
attack?
was a couple of months, but it was definitely before I could walk. At that stage, I was suffering from night terrors, mental anguish, hallucinations. So I was in a bad way psychologically, and for that reason, I couldn't continue with my studies in that year. And I had to do something to to change my mindset. And one of the things that I did change, I started thinking of this experience in the following way, that I'm not actually a shark victim. I'm not a victim of a shark attack. I'm actually a survivor of a shark attack. I survived it, and I treasure that, and I must work on that. The surviving aspect of this attack became very strong in my way of thinking, and for that reason I decided the only way that I'm going to heal was to go back into the sea, which was very difficult. I can't explain to you how I felt the first day I put my feet in the water again.
No.
I did not...
So you're consciously conquering your fears?
Absolutely. It was a conscious decision to face the fear, to experience the fear, and I did not choose to start surfing at another beach or a safe beach. I decided I must go back into the same water where I was bitten a couple of months before. And that was, I must say, that was very difficult. I will never forget that as long as I live. And I remember the first time I set foot in the water at that same spot, I was overwhelmed by so much fear. I can't describe the level of the fear. I was very, very scared. So I felt the fear, and I had to make a decision. Am I going to stop with my water activities like snorkeling, fishing, surfing, or am I going to approach this in a different way? And that was my decision. The next day I decided to go back, and I want to experience the feeling of fear. I thought, let me feel what it feels like. But I instruct my own mind that it's unlikely that this will happen again. It's unlikely that I will be bitten again by a shark at the same spot. So on the second occasion I stayed in the water for a bit longer, and I soon realized afterwards that that was the beginning of my healing or my recovery.
Okay.
To do the things that I love, don't put your life on hold. Experience the fear. I think it's quite natural that I was fearful and very scared. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was very scared.
I think anybody would be.
But I had to deal with it. And not see myself as a victim. It is something that happened, unlikely to happen again, and focus on positive aspects of sport and life in general. And over time, I realized that this has not been so bad. I actually started to treasure the scars on my leg. I started to treasure this whole experience because it's part of me. This is my story. It's nobody else's story. This is my story. And I was so blessed to have survived this.
And it was traumatic. Eh?
Yes, but it became a special part of my life. And it will always be a special part. I don't want to change it for anything. I treasure the shark attack. That was fine. I survived it, and it helped me in so many other ways.
What do you mean it helped you in so many other ways?
Just on the issue of fear, for example, we sometimes live in a world which causes a lot of fear. You drive on dangerous roads, you wake up at night, you think there's a burglar in the house, things like that. We also become fearful of people. In my profession, especially in the beginning years, you get judges who are very difficult, the junior counsel or junior attorneys, and through the shark attack I learned that don't be fearful, do what you must do what you love.
They can't be worse than the shark.
At least they can't bite me. And just deal with that.
Yes.
And over time, some of my friends started saying to me, Gideon, you probably just found yourself at the wrong place, at the wrong time, when this shark took you. I thought about that, and I actually changed my mindset in that regard. I did not agree with this statement, and I started telling myself, Gideon, maybe you found yourself at the right place, at the right time. When death stared me in the eye, but life smiled upon me. And I tried to remember the beautiful winter's day when the shark attack took place.
Well, that's
So I've got no regrets. At one point, I experienced emotions of anger. Because why did it happen to me? But it served no point to harbor feelings of anger. Anger at what or whom?
Yeah.
It's just a fact of life. So,
but it's wonderful that you've been able to work through that trauma and that you've turned it into something positive. Because in life, fear is something that holds so many people back. They're too afraid, especially our younger professionals out there. They're afraid of taking on something. They're afraid of appearing in court. They're afraid of their senior colleagues and so on. So your message would be, don't be afraid.
But Christy, what you're saying now is very true, because I did experience that fear can actually paralyze you, that you can't function properly as a person. We're not supposed to live like that. And whether fear is caused by circumstances such as assault or robberies or whatever, fear can be caused in so many ways. We become stressed because of small things. It turns into fear. We become uncertain and reluctant to live life to the full, and that shouldn't be like that. And for that reason, I treasure this experience, because in my mind, I actively turned this into something positive. And I know some people frown upon this. They said, but how can it be positive? Christy, I can assure you, this shark attack was the most positive event in my entire life. Nothing compares with this. I treasured it. I'm proud of the scars on my leg. Well, I'm proud of the story. I'm proud of the own experience.
That's amazing. Gideon, we have to wrap this up because we're getting to the end of our time period, and I believe we're going to have you back here, and thank you for that. Just to give a little bit of a spoiler alert for what's coming. You are the advocate. After varsity, you became a state advocate. That's in other words it's just the more senior form of a prosecutor that you find in the magistrates' court. A state advocate appears in the High Court and is a representative of the Director of Public Prosecutions, but in those days it was the Attorney General. Is that correct?
You see, that is correct.
And you did the Captain Andre Stander case, the case of what did they call him?
Yeah, the friendly robber.
The friendly robber. That feature on Netflix. There was a movie about that.
Yes, I've seen the movie, and there's also a book written called Stander.
And another spoiler alert for another episode coming is your story about, I think you prosecuted the first hijacking case in South Africa.
Yes, Christy, I was involved in the first international hijack trial in South Africa, because it involved South Africans.
That's amazing.
Who got involved in the hijacking of an Air India passenger plane in the Seychelles.
But that's also an episode on its own.
Yeah, that's a story for another day.
We're looking forward to that. And then there's the book you wrote, and we'll get to that as well. That's amazing. And you did the first private prosecution in South Africa successfully.
Yes, I just want to correct you. Some people ask me this question. It's actually not the first private prosecution. It's the first private prosecution for murder that was done successfully.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that's also going to be a very interesting story.
It certainly was. In terms of my experience, insofar as court work is concerned, I also treasure this private prosecution. It meant a lot for me from many perspectives. I've learned a lot through the private prosecution.
Okay.
Not only about the law, but also about people.
We're looking forward to that. Gideon, thank you for coming tonight and coming to visit us, and thank you for spending some time with us on this podcast today. We know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate having you here. Thank you.
No, thank you, Christy. Your time is equally precious or valuable.
But I do this for the love of it. Thank you, Gideon.
My pleasure.
Stay tuned for Gideon's next visit, when he'll be sharing with us the story of South Africa's most notorious bank robber, the famous Captain Stander.